Today in 7-1, we're going to talk about ratio and proportion, and the majority of this should be review for you. So what is a ratio? A ratio simply compares two numbers by division. You've been dealing with ratios actually for many years now. So an example of a ratio would be, write a ratio expressing the slope between point C and D. Well, you've done this before. You know that the slope is equal to y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So all we're left with now is something such as 5 minus 3 over 6 minus negative 2. Simplifying this now, we see it's going to be 2 over, well, 6 minus negative 2 turns to plus, so we end up with 8 on bottom. Now this is not simplest form, so we're just going to change it to 1 over 4. And that's actually, we're done now. This here is a ratio. It is division, and it's comparing two numbers. So all the slopes that we find is actually a ratio. I guess the only new concept here is the ways that we can write this. We can also write this slope not just as a fraction, but we could also write it as 1 to 4. Also, you could also write it simply in words of 1 to 4. And that is a ratio expressing the slope between these 2 points. It's all three of these answers here. So know that a ratio can be written as a fraction, as we had at first, or we can have a number separated by a colon, or you can just simply have in words of number to a number. One great thing about ratios is that we see them all the time. Ratios are used in everyday life. Here's an example, although it's dealing with triangles. It says that the ratio of angle measures in a triangle is 1 to 6 to 13. What is the measure of each angle? Relating three numbers in a ratio is perfectly fine. You could actually relate as many as you want, but in this case there's 3 because there's going to be 3 angles that we're dealing with. Now, just so you understand what we're talking about, we could have a triangle. I don't know what this triangle is going to look like, but what this ratio means, this 1 to 6 to 13, means that one angle measure could be 1, while another is 6 and another is 13. Well, we know that's not true because they don't add up to 180. And now we could keep on doing this, is that we could have a triangle like this. Now we could multiply each one by 2. We could have a 2, we could have a 12, and we could have a 26. But the downside is, again, we don't know that all these add up to 180, or rather, they don't add up to 180. So how we do this then is that we say, well, we know one angle is 1. How about x? We know it's going to be 1x. It's going to be 1 times something. And I got that 1 from right here. The next angle, which we're going to add, is going to be 6 times something. Again, it's x. Now we can add one more. It's going to be 13 something, 13x. When we add all these up, we know it's going to be 180. So let's go ahead and add these numbers then. We see 1x plus 6x plus 13x is 20x is equal to 180. Divide by 20, and x is equal to 9. Therefore, what that means is that now we have 1 times 9 will give us a 9. So we know one of the angles is 9. Then we know 6 times 9, which is going to yield 54. And lastly, we have our 13 times 9, which will give you 117 degrees. Now, if you added all these up, it will be 180, and therefore we have found each measure of our angles. The biggest key here was knowing that we need to relate all of our numbers with an x on there because we didn't know the exact number. We just knew the ratio of these numbers. Moving on to a very related subject, which is proportions. A proportion is an equation stating that two ratios are equal. Now, for example, if I told you A over B is equal to x over y. What we have here is a proportion because we have one ratio equal another ratio. And with proportions, we have what we call a cross products property. And what it states is that in a proportion, if a over b is equal to x over y, and b and y are not 0, then ay is equal to bx. Well, where did that come from? It's simply cross product. You could multiply the b up and y up, and therefore we were left with ay is equal to bx. And that is exactly what our cross products property states. And you should have used cross multiplying before. Now let's go ahead and use that property, that cross products property, to solve this proportion. Now we know from that property is that what we can do is cross multiply here. We can cross multiply to end up with 2y times 4y is equal to 8 times 9. Multiplying throughout, we end up with 8y squared is equal to 72. Trying to get y by itself, we first need to divide by 8. To see that y squared is equal to 9. Now notice, we have y squared equal to 9. We've got to get rid of this squared somehow. So let's do the opposite. Let's take the square root. Notice, we are introducing a square root. There was no square root in here before. Now when we did this, the squared and the square root will undo each other. So we get y is equal to. Now, because we introduced the square root, there was no square root until we put it in. Whenever you do that, you have to add a plus or minus in your answer. And now what's the square root of 9? It is 3. So our answer, we have two of them. It's y is equal to positive 3 and y is equal to negative 3. Now finally, we have one more example. Given that 16s is equal to 20t, find the ratio t to s in simplest form. So let's go ahead and write 16s is equal to 20t. What we're looking for is the ratio t to s. So we want t over s. I'll go ahead and take that note. We want, because the ratio t to s, we want t over s. So in order to do this, if we have 16s is equal to 20t, and we want t over s, we need to divide by s. So we have 16s is equal to 20t, and dividing by s, we end up getting 16 is equal to 20t over s. But what we want is only t over s. So we need to divide by 20 now. We end up with 16 over 20 is equal to t over s. Now we're actually done, but we want in simplest form. So now is just where we need to reduce. Both of these can divide by 4, so we end up with 4 over 5. Now we cannot simplify this any further, so 4/5 is our ratio. 4 to 5 is the simplest ratio of t to s, and we are all done. But as a reminder, we can express our answer as 4 to 5, and that's perfectly fine as well.